Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rhymes Reasons, and this is your guest, Edward Rhymes. And we have a special, very, very special program for you today. We will be talking with Dr. Arash Danesh Zadi, Professor of Education at the University of San Francisco. He is also the editor of the Journal for Peace and Justice Studies, National Outreach Coordinator at the Save the Kids Radio and News and book review editor at Journal of Culture and Education. And yeah, you get the idea. He is a phenomenal individual. Okay, I became very impressed with him and his work as he and I got to know each other better. And it's going to be a special program for you tonight because we're going to cover a host of subjects. We're going to cover all the things that his work entails. We're going to deal with education. We're going to talk about mass incarceration. We're going to talk about institutional and systemic racism and even foreign policy. Yes. Yes. We're going to talk about all those things this evening on Rhymes Reasons. But on Rhymes Reasons, I usually have what I call my Rhymes Reasons rant, right? I usually have what I call my Rhymes Reasons rant. And what is my Rhymes Reasons rant right now, ladies and gentlemen? Well, I've been, starting a little trouble, it seems, on Facebook because I've been crazy enough and I've been, just crazy enough to post things that I didn't think were particularly, controversial. All right. When I talk about in this society, in this world, that you can be, as a white woman, both what? Privileged, especially in the US, both privileged and both, targets of misogyny, targets of sexism, targets of chauvinism. Very true. But when it comes down to the basic essentials between a white woman and a black man, white women hold more sway in our society. That's just the way it works. The way it works. And I didn't look at that as a particularly controversial, saying or statement. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, real history, and the real reality of what black folks live every single day in this country cannot be ignored. Some of you may want to hide from it, some of you may want to duck and dodge it. That's up to you, but I choose not to. I choose not to duck and dodge these very strong, these very great realities that impact the lives of people of color every single day. Then I went on to say, I'm accused of making Marx roll over in his grave because I bring this up, you know. And so I get the thing thrown at me, identity politics. You're engaging in identity politics, and how does that help you combine with the lower class, working class white person that's in poverty? If you're talking about this, you're dividing. That's what the empire wants you to do. This is the stuff that was thrown at me today. Okay, this is the stuff that was thrown at me today. Now understand this, that many whites in poverty in this country have allowed themselves to be sucked into the feelings of racial superiority. Let's really think about this. This is where traditionally and currently white supremacists has drawn its members. It's from the white working and lower class. Now, that's not on me. That's not on me. That's just a reality that has played itself out in this country for centuries. Now, it is not about identity politics is not the reason I don't get along with folks who happen to get sucked into racism. It's the racism of races that doesn't allow me to get along with these folks. Okay? So let's stop with the whole, as I said on my post, please stop with all the uncritical Marxist love, please. Okay? Marx had some great ideas, but he wasn't all that. Okay? I don't have this same love, all right? I don't have this same hook, this hang up on, Marx would be rolling over in his grave. What am I? I'm not trying to impress Marx. I'm trying to speak on the behalf of people who have been marginalized and continue to be marginalized. And here's my problem, okay? And here's my very big problem, and it's in a number of areas. Is that, and there were women, white women, who brought this out during the marches. They were saying, well, I guess I'll see if the next, Black Lives Matter protest, right? They were the ones that were pointing those things out as well, too. God bless them. I'm glad they were there that on the ball. I really am. That there are people out there that on the ball, because that's what's been missing. You want solidarity with black women, but by and large, white women voted for Trump. They did. By and large, whenever affirmative action measures come up on the ballot in states, white women vote against it. They do. Even though more than any demographic, they benefit from white privilege more than any group. Any group. But they're the ones, when it comes on the ballot, they vote against it. Black, Latina, women, and Asian women overwhelmingly vote for it. So where's the solidarity here? Look, you can keep talking about this as white women having a problem with me saying what I said. I really do hope you get over it, but I'm not going to stop saying what I'm saying. You seem to lose sight of the fact that it is their black boys, black women's boys, who are the ones being killed on the street. Now, show some solidarity with them on those things as well. Don't get all mad at me because I say your white skin affords you more privilege in the United States than my black skin on my male body. Okay? It is a fact and reality of life. Now, I'm not saying we can't work together, but I cannot work with anyone who's not going to base that relationship on truth and respect. Look, people, all this talk about we got to come together, you got to deal with the things that separate you before you come together. If I want to come together physically with someone in Europe, I have to go over the miles that separate me from that person in Europe so I can see them in person if I want to see them in person. I have to go over the ocean. I have to do a bunch of it. There are a number of ways I can get to Europe, but there are miles between me and Europe right now. And I have to go through those miles to get to Europe, to get to that person I want to be with. What am I trying to say here? What I am trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is this. There are miles of history that separate us. There are miles of reality that separate us. And until you are willing to go through those miles to get the unity, we can't have the unity. You want unity, but you don't want to go through the miles it takes to get that unity. Well, look, that's the only way I can work. And that's the only way real unity takes place. Period. So, that's my rhymes, reasons, rant, all right? Now, more news. Betsy DeVos becomes the Secretary of Education. Oh my goodness. Now, look, I was writing about the education, the privatization of education under President Obama and under Arne Duncan. Arne Duncan, by the way, President Obama's Secretary of Education from 2009 to 2015, did not spend one day as a classroom teacher. Now, he was the CEO. Get the name of the title now. CEO of Chicago Public Schools. I mean, you really dig that? CEO of Chicago Public Schools. That right there ought to tell you what direction, national education was going to head in. So here's the thing. I was talking about all these things under President Obama, the privatization, the corporatization of schools, the mass school closing and predominantly black, predominantly Latina and Latino neighborhoods. Okay? Brown and black people were being impacted and nobody was out there protesting. I didn't see it. Only the black and brown folks were really protesting because it was happening in our neighborhoods. Okay? So now people are, going crazy over Betsy. I don't blame them. I mean, she's a horrible pick as a Secretary of Education. Period. You won't get any argument from me. Not at all. And I think we have a right to be, perplexed as to why anybody would think she would be a good choice for Secretary of Education. Nevertheless, this is a continuation of what already was taking place for the past 8 years. Well, even Bush was doing it. So we can look at the past 16 years. So this isn't new, people. Now, don't get me wrong. Picking Betsy DeVos as the Secretary of Education is like throwing gasoline on a fire instead of water. I mean, there's no way I think she makes it better. But you've been ignoring the schools, especially the schools that black and brown people occupy for a number of years. For a number of years. That's been ignored by my white, liberal, progressive, and Democrat friends. My brothers and sisters who happen to be white progressives, white liberals, or white Democrats have ignored that dynamic for years. These schools are being closed for years. Schools have been being privatized for years, corporatized for years. And not a peep. But it seems like if Trump picks them, we can, muster up the firepower to aim our guns, rhetorically speaking, at this, the enemy who is Betsy DeVos, picked by Donald Trump. Look, she will not ever get my vote from her work so far as an adequate teacher, period, let alone Secretary of Education. Okay? And Donald Trump and all you people trying to defend Trump, you can't defend these picks he's making for his cabinet. You keep talking about, well, Trump's going to straighten. Well, Trump's no, no, no. Trump is not straightening anything out when these are the picks he's making. These are the people he's entrusting with education. These are the people he's trusting with, the state sessions. Oh my goodness, Attorney General, are you kidding me? And you're still trying to tell me how Trump is going to straighten things. I don't get the more I travel this year, the more I travel in my mind because my health has made it very difficult to travel in body. But the more I travel in my mind, the more I understand how we all need to just admit that the people that we're trying to make our heroes are not. Stop making elected officials and politicians who will tell you anything to get in office and anything to get your vote. Stop making them look like that they possess the altruism that they do not. Just please stop. Stop. Just say no. Just say no. All right? Just let it go and just say no. Oh my goodness. Now, there are some people, and I talked about this too. We're still waiting for uh, Dr. Dinesh Zadi to call. But I had posted something a few days ago about Trump doing something that, President Obama did not do in his 8 years in office, and that is actually sitting down and meeting with the black presidents of the historically black colleges and universities. In all of his 8 years, people keep calling him the first black president. He is, but he's also bi-ethnic. I say that not because, I don't claim the fact that he's black, but a lot of white folks don't claim the fact that he's white as well. Getting back to my original point though, HBCUs, okay, historically black colleges and universities, in all of his 8 years in office, he did not meet one time with the presidents of those colleges and universities to talk about their unique circumstances. He did not one time go to a conference for historically black colleges and universities in those 8 years. Now, Trump, and people call it a political move, I agree, but look, I don't care if it's a political move or not. If he's willing to do what President Obama wasn't willing to do, I'm all for it. Okay? So, because I actually care about education, all right? I don't, I'm not playing this game that people are playing. So, Trump is also said to be not just meeting with him, but in the process, because of, Omarosa, being, one of his advisors, uh, about to write an executive order that would give more funds to historically black colleges and universities, something that President Obama did not do either. So when you look at this, now a lot of people took that and ran with it, my post and shared it. See, Donald Trump's not a racist. No, no, no. Donald Trump's not a racist. Look at what he's doing for historically black college university. He can't be a racist. See. Well, look, I saw Hitler kissing children, all right? And what if I told you, I saw Jeffrey Dahmer with some kittens. Does that change the people that he killed, cooked, and ate? Does the Holocaust disappear because Hitler bounced the kid on his knee? Does the Trail of Tears go bye bye because Andrew Jackson was nice to a Native American once in his life? No. So stop saying dear friends, dear white friends, because that's who's been doing it. I got to be honest. Dear white friends, I love you. Understand that. Understand this. Dr. Rhymes doesn't dislike you. He's not angry with you. But Dr. Rhymes has something to say to you. Stop saying he's not racist. He is. He's done plenty of racist things. That kind of sort of makes you a racist, okay? It kind of sort of makes you a racist. So, from now on, don't use that as an example because it doesn't make the racism that they've committed or been guilty of over the years go away because he does this one act. I remained unconvinced. I think he's still a racist, okay? Now we got Dr. Aresh Danesh Zadi online, and I've been waiting to talk to this brother. Hello, brother. How are you?
How are you, Dr. Rhymes? Thank you for having me.
Oh, but how could I not? You know what? I saw the things you were doing, and you are the type of guest that Rhymes Reasons was started for. That this program was started for because you are doing some great and wonderful things. But I do have to be honest. It was
Yes,
one of
sir.
your posts that attracted me to the actual work you were doing when the whole ban of people from Islamic countries, and we started talking about the bombs that have been dropped on those different countries over the past 8 years, well, 16 years, with George Bush. And we started talking about
Mm-hmm.
that, and you talked about the students you lost and the other things that have taken place, in your life as an educator, as a griot, in my opinion, in the community. Um, and so that's what attracted me to your work was that one post that you put up. You said you lost something like 17 students this past year. Was that
So in the last 17 years of teaching, I've lost 16 students.
okay? All right.
Um, and, there's a certain level of circuitous poetry in that as a
Right.
first gen immigrant refugee serving in communities, and as a man of color,
Right.
serving in communities where the preponderance of students that I teach, the overwhelming majority are immigrant youth of color.
Mm,
Um, it's there's a certain catharsis to it,
right.
and so much of this work, as much as I just heard you talk about, you can wax rhapsodic about, you know, um, the content in
Right.
education and the delivery, but it
Right.
can never be apolitical.
Right.
This work can never be apolitical. It can
No.
never be ahistorical.
No.
All it can ever be is abstracted.
Right.
And, for me, it can never be abstracted because it's visceral. It's so personal. So much of my personal arc is embedded in the stories that I'm trying to amplify.
Right.
And I take exception to the fact that we treat so much of public service as as a transaction, as
Right.
if we can actually empower youth. I think there's a stark contrast between empowering youth and creating the conditions in which the power that they already have can be amplified.
Right.
And so it's difficult when I hear stories and I meet burgeoning youth whose stories are just bubbling to the surface. They
Right.
haven't even finished grade school yet, and it's taken away from them far too early. And so it makes me go harder. But I know this work is not for the faint of heart. So
No,
I
it's not.
appreciate you allowing me to be a bedrock on behalf of the students that I've served over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in the projects of the South Side of Chicago, and my birth
So you
certificate.
already know.
Yeah, my birth certificate had Negro on it. So, I
Mm, mm,
yeah.
mm.
So that's born and raised South Side of Chicago, and done a lot of teaching in the inner city, and done a lot of work in the inner cities of some of our like Pittsburgh, New Bedford, Massachusetts, Chicago, Minneapolis, and so when I saw the work that you were doing, it was so much uh, like the work I had done. And health has slowed me down, but I do what I can. And so when I saw the work you were doing, especially as a professor of education at the University of San Francisco, and how you were talking about
Mhm.
what your opening dialogue, your first day dialogue was to your students. Could you share that with our audience,
Right.
please?
Oh, absolutely. So for the past 3 years, I've been teaching a couple classes. One is a critical race theory class called the Sociology of Hip Hop, and
Right,
the other class is about hegemony in higher education, called Campus Cultures and Environments in the School of Education at the University of San Francisco. And so every year on the first day of class, I want students to push into their discomfort and come out sort of with a critical understanding that until things land on our doorstep, it's really difficult for us to truly feel seismically moved to change.
right.
And so I generally start off with something under the auspices of Good Morning Students. I'm Dr. D. It's good to see you here. I'm proud that we're all going to accomplish so much together. But then I say, there's something first that you should know about me. And before I am your professor, I'm a radical scholar activist. And what that means as a radical activist is that I'm going to uproot the crux of a problem, which makes some of you uncomfortable. But that's the point. I want them to feel those reverberations. I want them to be able to find the intersectional connection between the students that we purport to serve and those that whose oppression we perpetuate. And if I may add, Dr. Rhymes, I think one of the greatest contradictions as servants of the public is that we can somehow opt in and out of this critical work. That
Right.
somehow we are not also complicit in it. And so I think that's a certain level of dissonance that I live with, that knowing that I teach at a school that's predominantly white in a community that's ever gentrifying, that I
Right.
cannot even afford to live in as someone with a doctorate,
Mm.
to students who, mostly come from historically privileged and leveraged communities. We're talking about white, cis, heteropatriarchal men and women, not to cisgender, but and to talk about subverting oppression
Right.
from these backgrounds is a certain level of discourse that needs to happen. But most importantly, there's a certain level of introspection that we cannot blame the victim. We have to take account of the fact that
Right.
so much of transformation in communities in the inner city is about control and autonomy. In that they're and until the folks who are the primary stakeholders actually have a seat at the proverbial table to make decisions on their own behalf, all we're doing is fostering codependency. All we're doing is going to the hood, like, these really cheesy Sandra Bullock movies that come out every Christmas, talking about, I'm going to the hood with my beautifully patterned cardigan sweater, and I'm finna save me some black boys and girls. And I'm tired of that deficit lens.
Yeah.
The mantra that I have in class is not really giving the kid a tissue, but really asking yourself, why is the kid crying in the first place?
Right.
And until we can backward engineer and ask ourselves where those tears came from, everything is going to feel like we're putting Band-Aids on bullet wounds.
Yeah.
I don't want to put Band-Aids on bullet wounds. I want to get to the crux of the issue, which is why I talk about getting to the root of the problem. So I teach a class that's predominantly comprised of teachers and practitioners and researchers and all of the above. And, the first thing I do when we talk about how to create more just and verdant school structures is y'all should know the history of schools. I
Right.
think there's something ironic about relying on a school system that was founded on anti-black literacy laws,
Right.
indigenous kidnapping, draconian discipline that exists today, and then we're going to rely on this very same system for salvation. And so I think it's important for us to begin the school year by historicizing the history of the indigenous boarding schools, the history of the Oklahoma and South Carolina anti-black literacy laws, the history of the corporal punishment that continues in 15 states today, mostly in the rustic belt, that are disproportionately impact black and brown youth. The fact that in the Mission District where I grew up, black youth comprised 9% of the populace, but 77% of the suspensions. We cannot rely on this system to be a salvation until we can talk about the fact that this is all by intent. It kind of reminds me of one of my favorite quotes by Huey P., who, when he said something akin to, and I'm paraphrasing, white people are a trip because they exterminated the Native American, then they dress like them in class every November. What kind of necrophilia is that? You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's important for us to not tokenize and banalize the same history that we relive. So
Yeah. I find that another, paraphrasing Huey P. Newton again, is that he talked about the black community being like an occupied country, pretty much like Vietnam was, or any other country that's occupied by an occupier. And so even in your own country or your own community, so to speak, you're treated as the outsider. And so that takes some heavy duty, that's some heavy duty stuff. I mean, that's some powerful stuff. I want to know, because this is the question I ask people. I've had, professors on and teachers on before. And when was that moment to you, Arash, is when you said, all right, this is what I want to do. This is what I have to do. When was that? Was it, 8-year-old, Dr. D? Was it, 15-year-old? When was it? When did it go off for you?
It's difficult for me to point to a line and say this is where the veritable light bulb went off. But
Right.
I think overall, there have been multiple times in my life, either when I've been with colleagues / friends and close students. I've been at funerals. I've been to 16 of them. I just went to one last week for a student that I knew since he was 6.
Right.
And there was a pastor who talked about the fact that so many of our youth are suffering from a sickness of nihilism, a sickness of self-hate. And he kind of had this like out-of-body existential moment where he just said, why do we keep saying the same things over and over again?
Right.
That Harriet Tubman told us about, and other scholar educators and activists, and Stokely Ben told us about this. And I say, for me, the moment was growing up in a household where my mom was part of the Algerian chapter of the Black Panther Party. I'm having the same conversations with my mom as an 8-year-old as I'm having with my students as a 30-year-old. And, the fact that we're having the same conversations, it, to me, kind of portends that we're waking up to the same horrific reality.
Right.
And so I felt like so much of activism is about ownership. And so many of the people that I saw advocating on behalf of the youth that you and I fight for, Dr. Rhymes, are not from those communities. And I'm not begrudging them. I'm not throwing any tacit shade at them.
Right.
What I'm trying to say is that we can't, Assata told us this too, we cannot rely on our executioners to educate our children.
Right.
And I just wanted a sense of ownership to be able to tell my story.
Right.
And to me, liberation is being able to really take ownership over how one frames their own identity. And so I can tell you that there have been seminal moments in my life that have made me want to share stories. I can tell you about the fact that I can remember as a 6-year-old when the Iraqi F-16 missiles that were subsidized by the empire that I live in today were flying overhead, and I was in a bomb shelter with my mom, huddled with complete strangers whom I had never met before, thinking to myself that one day, even as a 5 or 6-year-old, when I get out, they need to know about this. They need to know that I don't feel free. I don't feel free, and that this fabricated enemy that's flying overhead like the big bad wolf is one that's the same country that I'm serving today as an educator created. And so I want that contradiction to be told. And the only person that could underscore that contradiction was me. So I vowed to myself as a 5-year-old that if I were to make it out of the war alive, that I would speak on behalf of those who didn't. I lost both of my brothers in the Iran-Iraq war when I was a kid. And in high school, I grew up in the Mission District in San Francisco, and I can remember in high school I had 3 pictures in my locker. One was a picture of Aaliyah, the singer, because that was going to be my wife. The second was Tupac, because given his connection with a
You have to
female,
explain. It's Tupac,
I wanted to be
man.
a scholar activist.
Yeah, it's Tupac.
I wanted to be a scholar, activist, poet like Pac. And then the third was actually a picture of the 6-foot hole where the F-16 missile blew up my house 2 months after my mom and I fled to Germany to live in a refugee camp. And so when I look at that picture, there's obviously a great deal of burden that I sort of self-imposed and to wear on my shoulders. But there was also a certain level of responsibility that the boundaries of all the countries that I come from, being a biracial man, are also representative of the violence that created those boundaries. The fact that, I have documentation that says I'm a refugee, I'm here under political asylum, to me is a certain level of violence that created that identity. And
right,
and without that story, I think people take that violence for granted. People may not even know that violence existed. They may think that my mom and I fled my country from my two dead brothers out of our own volition, not because we
hmm
had to seek refuge.
right,
And the level of psychological trauma that it must have caused my mother to go to the same country that subsidized the war that displaced and
yeah,
destabilized our country to begin with, that
right,
was something that only an educator could bring to light. And so
right,
being in a classroom, there's a certain level of autonomy that it affords me.
yeah, yeah. Yes, it does. Yes, it most certainly does. And I mean, you have a unique insight into the conversation, that's taking place right now when it comes to the executive order that Donald Trump signed. Well, here's the thing that, President Obama had done the exact same thing as well. So you have a unique
Mm-hmm.
insight into the things that the conversations that we're taking that are taking place right now. I did want to ask you
Mm-hmm.
I do want to ask you about the Save the Kids radio and news. Tell us about that.
Sure. So Save the Kids is a coalition comprised of scholar activists from all over the United States. We have chapters in multiple cities from Fort Lewis, Colorado to Oakland to Detroit to Louisville, Kentucky. It was founded by Dr. Anthony Nocella, who's an assistant professor at Fort Lewis College in Colorado. You should look him up. He has a lot of dope work on hip hop and activism.
Okay.
School to Prison Nexus. He does a lot of good work. So our mission is really to build capacity for community-based organizations that are focused on re-entry of formerly incarcerated youth
Mm-hmm.
to have pathways to education attainment, workforce development, just really a solvent and healthy lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
socio-emotionally, spiritually, and professionally. And so our role is really not a paternalistic one, but really as an one that maximizes outreach efforts across the United States. So
Yeah.
in some cases, some of the chapters are located in juvenile halls. So
Right.
juvenile halls have spoken word programs for youth who are
Mm-hmm.
interested in literature. So that's part of the Save the Kids chapter. So what Save the Kids will do is we'll fundraise and we'll help develop curriculum for that juvenile hall to have a spoken word curriculum inside the cage. Another chapter, like what we're doing right now in Oakland, is a community school model. So what we do with Save the Kids in Oakland is restorative justice is something that's really catching on. It's really vanguard in Oakland. So one thing that we're trying to do with Save the Kids is make sure that restorative justice is not conflated with restoring black people, right?
Right.
We're not trying to fix the black kids. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
them. What
Exactly.
we're trying to do is restore the school systems that look at black kids as something to be fixed, as
Mm-hmm.
some needy stepchild that needs to be sort of fine tuned like someone's flattened tire.
Or or
And so what we're trying to do is make sure, yeah,
or a problem to be solved.
yeah, or a problem to be solved, and that's a
Yeah.
problem that is again, it's perpetuated because the same people that are perpetuating this claptrap of black kids need to be fixed are not have not worked with black youth, are not have not been black youth themselves,
No.
are not understanding what it's like to be in that skin, to have to live in a state of ontological criminalization.
Right.
And so with Save the Kids, we're really about capacity building and amplifying a narrative of ownership back to the community.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that sounds like such great work. I don't know if you're familiar with Oscar Reed, who's done some very great work along lines of restorative justice. He basically came in on the ground floor of that whole thing years ago. I mean, when it first started.
Right.
He's a former player for the Minnesota Vikings. He's been a good friend of mine for, oh my goodness, for over close to 25 years. So yeah, I mean, he's done a lot of great work, and I mean, he's done a lot of work here in Minnesota along those lines. So I hear
Yeah,
you
I
on
would
that.
love the connection.
Yeah,
Sure.
well, you will. You will. I'll make
Yeah.
sure of that.
Thank.
Tell me more.
Yeah.
Tell us more about you're also the editor of the Journal for Peace and Justice Studies. Can you tell us a little bit about
Mm-hmm.
that as well?
Sure. So it's an international journal. We do book reviews, we do articles, both empirical and conceptual. The sort of the overall mission of the Journal of Peace Studies is to, and I appreciate you putting us on, is to think about conflict resolution in a way that does not take convenient detours from direct conflict with injustice.
Mm.
So when we're talking about the Journal of Peace Studies, so much of the accepted issues have to do with how activism and resistance exist in multiple milieux of education. We talk about alternatives to violence, certainly, but we're also talking about resistance. We're talking about ecological activism, environmental justice, and economic activism. Social justice in the ways of globalization, housing, homelessness, all the different ways that white supremacy and capitalism and all the different types of oppressive paradigms sort of fluidly take shape and become invisible to the naked eye. And so our journal is a representation, an interdisciplinary representation of resistance, but also provides best practices through research for resistance.
Well, I mean that's what, biannual?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I thought. What's on the horizon for Dr. D here? What's on the horizon for you, Arash? I mean,
Oh, wow.
yeah, what can we look forward to in the coming days, weeks, months, year, maybe?
Sure. So I am currently working on a couple books that will be released next spring.
Okay.
One book is it's called How Whiteness Stole Justice. It's co-authored with my colleague at Kutztown University in New York, in Pennsylvania, Dr. George Sorakos. That book is called How Whiteness Stole Justice, and it's basically about deficit models of youth intervention. So again, to allude earlier to something I mentioned about, restorative justice being co-opted into this deficit lens of black and brown youth need to be restored. We're offering alternatives to that solution. How restorative justice is a systems-wide change that needs to take place, not a hyper-individualistic change. So that book is coming out. I'm currently the co-editor of a book that was released last month with Lori Martin and Dr. Kenny Varner. And that book is currently available in a variety of publishing clearinghouses, including Amazon. It's called Understanding, Dismantling, and Disrupting the Prison to School Pipeline. In terms of my own work in the community, I'm on the Commission for Juvenile Justice Prevention in California. As you may know, Dr. Rhymes, in California, we just passed a law. One of the few silver linings to come out of the recent election cycle is Proposition 57 in California that abdicated from the practice of trying youth and young adults as adults in juvenile court.
That was
and
profound.
So I was part of the committee that helped write that bill. I want to continue doing policy advocacy work that divests from draconian policies that disproportionately impact historically marginalized students of color, LGBTQ students, immigrant students, refugee students like me. There's also work that's happening at Urban Strategies Council, which is the organization that I'm the associate director of, around violence prevention, gentrification. Right now, we have an Opportunity Youth Initiative where we're trying to connect disconnected youth, formerly incarcerated youth, in jobs programs. We have a commitment for a 1,400 jobs campaign starting this summer from the mayor of Oakland. So we're really working hard to make sure that when we talk about empowerment, we talk about achievement, we're also thinking about all the other conditions that need to have that need to take place in order for school to be a reality. Because if you can't put food on your table and you can't afford rent, who really cares about school? You know what I mean? So people really need to have realistic options for solvency before they can think about going to class on time. So there's a lot of good work that's happening. For me personally, I'm applying for full-time teaching positions as well as policy work, and so I'm really interested in trying to get my feet firmly planted in the policy work in the academic realm, and I'll continue to do my research on school systems that are moving away from zero tolerance. One of the issues that I'm seeing in California is that as zero tolerance policies are becoming illegal, quite frankly, there's nothing to replace them. So schools are putting in restorative justice policies, and it's really just a mediation session. But what's happening is black girls and black boys are still being seen as in need of restoration. So I want to focus on really working with our school districts throughout California and across the United States on how to be more intentional on flipping the script on restorative justice and other interventions to give ownership back to the community. And my research amplifies that. The community work we're doing amplifies that. Urban Strategies Council does a lot of that work. So what we do is we do research on behalf of public agencies like school districts to ensure that, you know, when we're removing a tumor, like a zero tolerance policy, we're also making sure that there's something put in its place that's conducive to a healthy lifestyle and a healthy educational and job prospect for the youth. Because I think that one of the greatest misconceptions of injustice in America is that, I think there's three fallacies. One is that I call the policy fallacy, which is that you can implement a policy and it can have a paradigm level shift. I think Brown versus Board of Education is a prime example. Somehow black youth, by proxy to white students, if black youth and white students go to school long enough, by proximity to one another, they're going to have interracial harmony and sing Kumbaya and all will be well. Well, that we certainly know that's not the case, right? No. We can look at the school pipeline as one very glowing example. We can also look at the fact that many black teachers that were educated in historically black colleges, like in Brownsville, were fired in mass shortly after Brown versus. The second fallacy is the fallacy of what I call the hyper-individualistic fallacy, or what I call the Obama-esque fallacy, that you can somehow elect the right president, or elect the right CEO, or elect the right principal of a high school, and they'll stop having racist policies. This is one of the greatest, I think, symptoms of capitalism, is that all of the harm that's done is relegated to one or two individuals, and all of the success that happens in your life is because of your own individual merit. And I think that we have to move away from that, because so much of the work that Donald Trump is going to, so much of the caustic work that he's going to accomplish, so much of the damage that's going to be done is not really because of him, it's because of the ideology that he's amplifying. There would be no Donald Trump if there wasn't already a necro-political system that upheld Donald Trump. If 53% of white women did not vote for Donald Trump, if we did not have plantation owners vie for an electoral college that exists today. So we forget that freedom, by definition, has to mean more than getting rid of oppression. It also has to mean that we don't just remove suspensions or zero tolerance policies for individuals who are hurling racial epithets, but we replace them with systems that are grounded in the indigenous village models that schools were created. The third fallacy is the fallacy of the racist. This idea that, to me, the word racist, and even quite frankly, racism, is becoming more and more obsolete. So many times when I do professional development seminars for teacher education programs and school districts across the United States, people will say things like, I've literally had someone in my grad class at Stanford years ago when I was still a graduate student say to me, I can't be racist because my son plays on the football team, and a lot of his black classmates come over for supper. First of all, who said supper? This ain't Little House on the Prairie.
Who says supper
Second
since
of
Little House
all,
on the Prairie?
you ain't gotta use the N word to make someone feel like a racial epithet, bruh.
Oh, oh,
So you
hold
you know
on.
what I mean? So you
I'm
gotta
sorry.
you know the individual
You
racist
did
that
this.
people think that some,
You did this. You're making me
yeah
laugh, brother. The Little House on the
yeah.
Prairie.
So
All
I
right,
just
go ahead. All right,
yeah
continue.
I just think that there needs to be an instrumental distinction between liberation and
Yes,
liberalism.
yes,
Because
exactly.
we've been acculturated to this noble lie since Brown versus Boer. It's the same
Right,
narrative that was promoted by the ilk of these white saviors, these unassuming white saviors who wear non-threatening cardigan sweaters and teach for America safety pins, who claim to love refugees, who miss Michelle Obama and who wish Hillary was president. Who also in the same breath will say things like Bill Clinton was not that bad,
right,
and then will say I can't be racist because I serve black students, as if a rapist can't be married, as if a sexist and a misogynist can't have girlfriends.
yeah.
You
There
know,
we go.
so the context of exploitation and slavery under which the United States was built, under which the school system was built,
Right,
is conveniently, I think, ignored by the typical democratic revisionist rhetoric.
right,
And I think that the vast wealth of the United States wasn't a voluntary project of individuals, but rather the brutal accumulation of capital. And that we have to move beyond this sort of love wins, let's take
right,
selfies and hugs with
right.
moments. We have
Exactly.
to think about the fact that you can't use tautological redundant terms like police brutality when they are quasi slave catchers. They
Right.
were created to execute the protection of white liberal wealth
Exactly.
and to save the nonsensical fragility of white feelings. And so
Right.
I think many of our liberal brothers and sisters are timid of shutting down the business as usual mantra because they benefit from it.
Right.
I can get a tax loophole by creating a nonprofit like Steve Perry that goes into the hood and tells black kids, hey, you know what will keep cops from shooting you? Wear a bow tie and pull up your pants and get a haircut. And when black cops see you, they don't see an existential criminal. Well, tell that to Samir Rice. Matter of
Yeah.
fact, tell that to
Oh
Dr.
my
Martin Luther
goodness.
King and tell that to Malcolm X. Last time
Exactly.
I checked, they were both wearing suits.
Exactly. Well, it hasn't
Yeah.
stopped, 5-0 from pulling over this PhD. Uh, so
Yeah, no,
no.
I hear you. That's why
Yeah.
we're folks.
Yeah. So you know what, man? That this cannot be the end of your, affiliation with Rhymes Reasons. We're gonna have you on again and again. Whenever you want
Happy
to
to.
talk, you have an open spot on this program. You most
I
certainly do.
appreciate it. And my bad for the epic ranting.
Oh no no no
I'm
no
off
no.
my soapbox.
I got my coffee late in the day, so you help me out. You help me out, man.
I'll just say this. Oftentimes, for the folks who are just new to this work, to this
Right,
activist work,
exactly.
I like to tell my students this. We often say in athletics, you have to work out because sometimes you don't see that your nutrition, your dietary habits,
Right,
and your workout habits, they catch up to you real quick, but
exactly.
it's invisible.
Right,
And much like the mantra of when people say fries only go to my hips if I believe they do, I think that that's how we treat classism, racism,
mm,
misogyny in
mm,
this country. I think that we can somehow tune
right,
ourselves out.
right.
We're still not complicit.
Exactly,
There is no
exactly.
opting out.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I
This is,
appreciate you, Dr. Rhymes.
yeah. I very much appreciate you, Arash. I have been saying this over and over again for like the past month or so. Is that you can't take 8 years off and then expect to be able to get back into the fight. You cannot have handed over your voice and your agency to one individual. And I got so tired of hearing Obama's got it, Obama's got it. No politician has it. You have to make them have it. So I got so tired of hearing that. But your analogy was perfect. I mean, it's kind of akin to what I've been saying is that you can't take those 8 years off and expect to be in shape to fight the fights that need to be fought. This is not a part-time job. This is not something that you clock out on. It is an everyday, day in, day out existence that, in a strange way, you're thankful for. You really are. I'm thankful to be a part of this, and I'm thankful for people like you. I really am. And so, like I said, you have an open invitation on this program whenever you want to rant or whatever. I have no
I
problem.
mean, I appreciate that. And for the folks who are listening, and by the way, shout out to the NSA. If you're listening, bite me. If you think that taking risks in education is dangerous, I want everyone on this program to really think about how dangerous it is to be routine, to cover their ears, to close their eyes.
Right.
If you think taking risks in the education sector is dangerous, try routine. It's lethal. And there is no good knowledge for our kids if our knowledge does not allow them to humanize themselves. And so if you are not humanizing the people that you serve, all you're doing is perpetuating the same status quo that you intend to suffer, and you are a walking contradiction. So just don't be a walking contradiction.
All right. All right. This was Dr. Arash Danesh Zadi, Professor of Education at the University of San Francisco, editor of the Journal for Peace and Justice Studies, National Outreach Coordinator at Save the Kids Radio and News, and book review editor at Journal of Culture and Education, and all around phenomenal and great individual. Thank you so much for being a part of this program.
Appreciate you, Dr. Ryan.
All right, you take care of
He's
yourself.
everything. Thank you.
We'll be in touch, okay?
You as well. Thank you.
Much love
Yes,
to
sir.
you.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you, family.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, folks, talk about a mic drop. I mean, brother came on the stage and just boom. It was beautiful. I mean, I could just sit back and listen. That was beautiful. Boy. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That was a great program. It was, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a great deal from it. It will be, it's recorded. You can listen to it as many times as you need to. He is doing some phenomenal work with those young people out in San Francisco and across the country, as a matter of fact. And he's also doing some great work with teachers who are going into our classroom. When I listen to him talk, I feel a little bit more hope that there's somebody out there who's instilling teachers who are walking into our classroom with the sort of knowledge that he just communicated here and articulated here. So I am extremely grateful for that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the show. And Thelma Rhymes' grandbaby boy has got to go. God bless. Be safe. Take care.
using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.